For more than 6 decades, America has been haunted by a gunshot that never really stopped echoing. Dealey Plaza became the altar of a new American religion, one built on secrets, cover-ups, and unanswered questions. We've heard every theory, every confession, every lone nut and magic bullet retelling imaginable. And yet, the most explosive truths may have been quietly sitting in the government's own files that were promised to be released and still aren't. My guest tonight isn't here to relitigate 1963. He's here to talk about 2025, because new material is finally emerging from those once classified archives, and it's not what we were told. Kris Millegan is the founder of TrineDay Books, one of the last independent publishing houses still willing to publish the uncomfortable. His company has become a refuge for historians, whistleblowers, and intelligence insiders whose work the mainstream won't touch. From CIA drug running to MKUltra to the hidden networks behind the Kennedy assassination, Kris has built an entire ecosystem of forbidden history. Now, as the annual Dallas JFK Conference approaches, he's connecting the dots that the Warren Commission and maybe even Hollywood never dared to. His message is simple but devastating. Dealey Plaza was just the final stop. The real story didn't end with Oswald. It began with a consensus inside intelligence, industry, and government that John F. Kennedy had to go. Tonight, we're not revisiting a murder, we're reopening a case on how power really operates and how the cover-up never ended. Kris Millegan, welcome to Strange Planet once again. How are you?
I'm just fine, and wow, Richard, I tell you, that was quite the introduction there. I really thank you about it. You know, life is interesting. I remember being in Spanish class in junior high school, and the announcement came over the loudspeaker that the president had been shot. And because this was Spanish class, we actually had, TVs there because they had lessons on the TV. And so they turned it on. And then all of a sudden, out of the intercom comes, "Will Millegan please come to the office?" I'm saying, what did I do, And I get down there to the office, and I was a paper boy at the time, and there's my paper boss. And they take me out of school to go sell newspapers on the street, So, but that shows you that the JFK hit was, it was traumatic. It was very traumatic for the United States. And, I just, continued to grow up. And I'd known my dad had been in intelligence, not because they'd talked about it at home. I remember my older brother one time in Tennessee says, "I think Dad works for the CIA." And I says, "Okay." I was 8 years old. What the heck, Mm-hmm. And it was never mentioned. And finally, he day before my 20th birthday, he tells me about his intelligence career and whatnot. So this leads me to trying to understand how the world really works, because what my dad told me, I didn't, it didn't compute. It didn't make sense, some of the stuff he told me. So, I
What did he tell you that didn't make sense?
Well, first he said the Vietnam War is about drugs. And I'm thinking he's talking about he said that, and there was these secret societies behind it. So I'm thinking he's talking about the mafia. And then he said communism's all a sham. These same secret societies are behind it all. It's all a big game. Okay. I'd been stuffed under the desk. The Ruskies were going to bomb us, Mm-hmm. And then the other thing he said was, there was this professor from Vanderbilt too there when they were talking to me. And they were saying that the Vietnam War, they were playing out a lose scenario, okay, which again didn't compute and didn't make any sense to a 19-year-old kid, And so, like I say, these questions hung out, and I'd always been, interested in the JFK assassination, and so, I like to read, and so I was reading, and I remember one time I was. I think it was a Gallery magazine, okay? And they had an article in there about the JFK assassination. And they were talking about, people talk about the mafia, the CIA, And then there was like a throwaway line, and some people talk about the involvement of secret societies, and that brought back the whole conversation that I'd had with my dad, and I really started to think about it, and just really went, and then I talked to somebody, and they told me, says, well, I told them a little stuff about what my daddy told me. They said, I'm a conspiracy theorist. And this was like in the early 70s. So then I took on conspiracy theory as an intellectual discipline. Okay. And, it's a very wide discipline. And the first thing I learned, because, I went out to all the bookstores and started saying, take me to a conspiracy section. And all of them had at least one book. Okay. And so I started collecting these books and got them in a pile and started reading them. And after a while, I says, wait a minute. I've got a book here that blames it all on the Jews. I've got a book that blames it all on the Masons. I've got a book that blames it all on the Mormons. I got a book that blames it all on the Catholics. I got a book that blames it all on the secular humanists, So I started to think, well, maybe these are like formula books, I don't like you, you don't like me, and, let's get people fighting back and forth. And so, I kept reading and kept looking. And the other thing that really started to stick out at me was the drug trade. Okay. Because a lot of the people that people would talk about, being involved in the Kennedy assassination, I would look, and they were also, some of them heavily involved and some of them just tangentially involved in the drug trade, because the drug trade creates this huge amount of money, okay, outside, that then allows these people to, corrupt things by paying people off and different things. So, and then the most craziest thing was I started to see ducks that were put in a row before Kennedy was even elected. Okay. So, and so that really shocked me. Okay. And I kept looking at it and reading the books and different things. And one of the best books out there was a guy by the name of Rodney Stick, Stich. He was a FAA inspector out of Chicago, and he was a pilot. And one thing, in delving into this underworld or whatever you want to call it, I found that pilots had a lot of good information, because these nefarious people, a bunch of them, they couldn't fly a plane, so they needed somebody to fly the plane. Okay, so we information from them, and then also photographers. Okay, because some of these official photographers, they'd blend into the woodwork, and the people would forget that they were there, and so we'd get information from them, and so.
Can I ask you just to jump in for a second and ask you about your father? Did the topic of JFK ever come up with your dad?
No, it didn't. Because one thing was I just didn't understand what he was telling me, right. and I had to read a whole bunch of books. It took me till I came across in 1986. A Sutton's book about America, about Skull and Bones, that finally, Dad wasn't nuts at all. He actually knew what he was talking about,
Anthony Sutton, yeah, who also wrote about the Communist Revolution and Wall Street, and I believe in Hitler, the rise of Hitler and Wall Street.
Right.
So was your father confessing to you, or was he proud of what he did for America, or was it more of as I say, a confession?
Well, I've often wondered about that. Okay, and a big part of me thinks, because see, this was the late '60s. I was growing my hair long and smoking some pot. Okay, and I think that he was just trying to let me know that me smoking pot was, there was more to it or something. By the time I finally understood what he was trying to tell me, he was very, very sick, and I couldn't talk to him. He'd had Parkinson's and been given some really heavy drugs, and then he soon died from pancreatic cancer. So I never really got to ask him the questions that I wanted to. And but going back to Rodney Stick, he wrote a bunch of books, Drugging America, Defrauding America, and different things. And in Defrauding America, he talked about a group called Pegasus. Okay, and when Harry Truman, signed the paper to set up the CIA and other things, he also then went and set up a group called Operation Pegasus. Okay, basically out of the Office of Naval Intelligence, to go off reservation and look inside and be able to inform the president that, hey, some of your intelligence people are doing hinky stuff over here. Okay. And there was a guy in Operation Pegasus, a guy by the name of Trent Parker, who was a naval intelligence on loan to the CIA, and he had a tap on Hoover's phone. Okay. Hoover didn't think that his phone could be tapped. Okay. And so they got a conversation there, okay, with Hoover and Johnson, okay, and they're the low men on the totem pole. They're so blackmailable, they're in your pocket, okay. And then they had Alan
Hoover was a cross-dresser, and Johnson, by some accounts, actually murdered somebody. So yeah,
right, yeah, they were both had corruption, okay, and then they had Dulles. Okay, Alan Dulles, the former head of the CIA, and he was the consigliere in this thing. And then the next person, and this one really threw me for a loop when I first read it, was George H.W. Bush. Okay, and then I looked into it. He was the Order of Skull and Bones, and the word on the street was that he made his bones in the Kennedy assassination, because in these secret societies, if you need to, rise up in these secret societies, you have to do certain acts, okay, and one of them is murder.
Like any gang initiation, doesn't matter. It could be a Latino gang, it could be a triad. That's your entree. You have to kill.
Right, and then there's the famous memo from Hoover, written a couple days after the assassination, that referenced George Bush of the CIA. And that's basically Hoover saying, hey, I know about this, and I'm covering my behind here. Okay. And then the last person on this was Nelson Rockefeller. Okay. And you see, first George H.W. Bush, he brings in the whole Bones crew. Okay. Which Averell Harriman, lots of very, influential people. And then Nelson, he brings in David and all of his cronies into the situation. Okay. And so that's your main crew. Okay. And with a gentleman by the name of Ed Lansdale writing the script. Okay. Because he was head of Operation Mongoose, which gave him access to all the military assets and the intelligence assets.
Just Mongoose was the attempted overthrow of Fidel Castro.
Right.
Where they were training dolphins to carry bombs, and they were sending them exploding cigars. All of this nonsense.
Right. So and when you have a conspiracy, I mean, you don't go, hey, I'm going to go kill the president. You want to join me? No. What you do is you keep your conspiracy very tight, and you go out and lie to other people to get them into the position so that when the action happens, they have to, either just shut up or support your action. Okay. Because you play them into certain positions. Okay?
Right. Well, you said the ducks were put in a row, though, even before Kennedy's election. Do you mean they assumed Kennedy was going to be elected, or it didn't matter who was elected? That assassination was designed as a coup to take over the executive branch.
Yes, and it had to do with Kennedy. Okay, I've been working with the Fitzgerald family. Okay, of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Okay, and the backstory is way more than we can talk about here. Okay. But when you look at the again, the secret societal network, okay? And you have, like the Knights Templar, they were a secret society, right? Okay. They got disbanded, okay, and the Pope signed a papal bull to disband them on 1122, okay? And so you have this long-standing date of 1122. It also happens to be when one of the Fitzgeralds was beheaded on 1122 in 1583.
So just the Fitzgerald family, just kind of give us a quick tour of the Kennedy family tree. So the Fitzgeralds were who? John F. Kennedy's grandfather, but the maternal side, on his mother's side.
No, it was on his father's side. Honey Fitzgerald.
Okay, all right.
And
we're going back to Ireland now, right?
Right. And like I say, it's a big long story. We've got some people that are going to be presenting this story. The Paul Fitzgerald will be presenting this at the JFK Historical Group convention at the DoubleTree in Dallas.
Let me just promote that for a second, and while I've got you on that topic. So this year's Dallas conference is called History Declassified, which is a pretty bold title, and we'll get into that. And that's happening, of course, in Dallas, the November 20th to the 23rd?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And that'll be at the DoubleTree there in Dallas. And then also they have a moment of silence at Dealey Plaza, on the 22nd, at 12:30.
Okay. And Paul Fitzgerald will be a descendant of the people, the Fitzgeralds in Ireland who were connected with the Knights Templar that were beheaded, or?
Well, they were.
I know we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole.
It's a long story. It brings in John Dee. It brings in Queen Elizabeth. It brings in the establishment of the Elizabeth, of the British Empire, and the whole idea of the killing of the king and the sacrificing of the king.
Wow.
And whatnot, because at its core, the Kennedy assassination is a mass trauma against the American people. Okay.
A ritual, yeah.
Right. And I mean, Dealey Plaza is set up as a ritual kill zone. I mean, you've got an obelisk, you've got, the water things. And, it's right next to the Trinity River. It's right near the 33rd degree parallel. And when you look at things that have happened to us Americans, okay, we've been subjected to psychological warfare, especially very strong when Skull and Bones basically started to take over our country very strong during the Spanish-American War, okay? And if you look at Dealey Plaza, I mean, it's funny, you look at the JFK assassination and 9/11, okay? Both of these things were mass trauma hits against the American people. And if you look at the land and at Dealey Plaza and the land where 9/11 was, both of those operations started in the 1930s to set up that kill zone there in Dallas, Texas, okay, and the kill zone there in 9/11. Now, we've done some amazing research about Dallas, Texas, okay, and we've shown that there's one street in downtown Dallas area that goes at a 33rd degree angle. Guess what street that is?
Elm?
Yeah, right where he was shot. Mm-hmm. That section right there is at 33 degrees.
Go figure. We just quickly connect some dots there. You mentioned the Knights Templar were banned by the Pope in, was it 1122?
It was, I believe, 1307,
Oh.
and in November 22nd.
November
Okay.
22nd. Okay,
April was
November
signed.
22nd, November 22nd, of course, also the Kennedy assassination. So they picked that date because they love to play around with numbers, don't they? That's their signature, right? Is that their way
Right.
of telling us that they're in control?
It sends, these quote unquote invisible signals to the population, because if you also look at classical numerology, okay, in classical numerology, 11 and 22 are your highest numbers, okay, and they both, 11 means mastery and 22 means super mastery. So if we kill the king, okay, on Bloody Elm Street on a day that signifies our mastery, okay, so if they're signaling that they're the masters, then who are we? Okay, we're the slaves. Okay, and so it's a mystical way of trying to control us through, it's a sophisticated psychological warfare. Okay, because if you present this, what do you want to call it? Not obscene, but ridiculous. Okay, yeah, this guy, he shot him up there. We have nobody that can do that shot again, but he shot him, in just 3 shots, and that's the story.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can lie to us, and it's so outrageous, and we know the lie, and they're sitting there at 5 o'clock clinking their happy hour glasses, okay, it's a huge psychological hit against the American people. And say, you don't mean anything. We can kill your president in broad daylight with a ridiculous thing and get away with it.
Right. Yeah, and the gaslighting, that this is just a common theme. In fact, not to get sidetracked too much, but with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we had the FBI and the governor of Utah in all of these press conferences keep saying we captured the assailant 33 hours later, or they kept hammering away 33. Come on, we know what that's all about.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible. And one thing that I found in conspiracy theory and doing these books and looking at things is that a lot of times you got to go down a blind alley before you realize that, wait a minute, I've been being lied to. I need to look over here and other places. So I'm very hopeful for the future, because I did an interview yesterday with a gentleman who was basically out of the Trump world or whatnot, and presented him with some information that they had no idea, because, we think, okay, we've told this bit, everybody must know this stuff, but they don't.
Dealey Plaza, you said it was the final stop. That's a chilling way to frame it. I mean, if Dallas was the last chapter, not the beginning, where does the real story begin? You've sort of intimated it, talking about these secret societies. But who wrote the script before the motorcade ever turned onto Elm Street? You sort of
Lansdale. Ed
Lansdale
wrote the script. Okay, and you're gonna bring in all kinds of different shooters. Okay, there's supposedly a report out of the Philippines from a shooter that was there, that was given truth serum, that talked about 26 different shooters on there. I did a book by Don Adams, an FBI agent, an incredible guy. They used him first to throw some shade about Miltier. But then he got moved to the Dallas FBI office to work on the JFK assassination. Okay. And they brought him up to the Texas Book Depository and took him up to the 6th floor and showed him the window. And he'd been in the Korean War, and he looked out there and he says, "No way Oswald did this." And the other FBI says, well, just keep that to yourself. They've already made the decision in Dallas. And then they took him into a room that they had a bunch of file cabinets about Oswald and a bunch of file cabinets about Kennedy and whatnot. And they had a movie camera up, projector up there, and they showed him the Zapruder film. And he said, there's no way Oswald did that. And they said, yeah. And he came out and he said that there was at least 14 different shooters along the route.
14, yeah. That doesn't surprise me. I used to joke, it's kind of a morbid joke, I suppose, but I used to joke that the only one who didn't have a gun that day in Dealey Plaza was Lady Bird Johnson. But who knows? Who knows? So, the parade route. There's some was that changed last minute? I've heard arguments on both sides.
And so have I, and so have I. And there's, I don't know definitively, but one thing that I found interesting here, okay, the government, we released all the documents, but the narrative hasn't changed. Okay. Oswald was still a lone nut. It's just that, maybe the CIA knew about him a long time beforehand, but the narrative hasn't changed. The official narrative.
No, not according to the mainstream media, but there were some interesting things there that I think maybe confirmed what were suspected by JFK researchers, or maybe they knew, but this was corroboration, and that was that Oswald, it seems to be revealed in the documents, Oswald and Ruby clearly had dealings with each other before November 22nd.
Yeah. And there's going to be several people at this conference. I know there's one gentleman that's going to talk directly about all the new documents and what they reveal. And then they're also going to have a panel discussion with several people about that on one of the days. So, I strongly do recommend people, if they can, to attend one of these conferences, because you just learn an awful lot. And, and not everybody agrees with everybody on everything. Okay. But, I've published books that, I don't agree with them, but the exposition and what you learn by reading them is very good, because
by my count, you've published 40 books.
44.
44. 44 books on JFK. That's interesting. You write, or you say that you don't always agree with. Here's an example. I know Dr. John Brady just published a book, and I was fortunate enough to write the foreword, and I think John is a terrific guy. But he wrote a book basically trying to dive inside the mind of Oswald and Sirhan and some others, based on the assumption that they actually did commit the murder, which I know neither of you and I agree with. But explain the rationale why you would. In fact, I got the book here. Breakdown, back there. Why would you publish a book that you don't? Maybe that some might say, well, that's just going to muddy the water.
Well, because you kind of have to touch all the bases, okay? And the good doctor brings out a lot of material that gives you pause to think, okay? And it's always good to think. And then when I told him, I says, doctor, the people that read a lot of our books, they want to hear something different, okay? But I respect a person that he's digging into it and showing it. And the thing is that Sirhan and Oswald, okay, were both the type of people that the secret societal system would use in their quote unquote MK Ultra type things. Okay, so whether they were touched by that or not, I mean, you had Oswald, and I'm firmly convinced that Oswald went through some MK Ultra type thing, and there was an Oswald file at the CIA for many, many years. And you look at the doctors that he went to see there in New York, and so I find value in Dr. Brady's work.
Yeah, so did I, which is why I agreed to write the foreword, even though I don't necessarily agree with the conclusion. I think you make an excellent point there, and this is something I always say. 2 things or 3 things or 20 things can be true at the same time. In other words, as you say, he could have been involved in MK Ultra. He could have been set up without having, fired the fatal shot. So I get what you're coming from. Any other, again, the conference is History Declassified, JFK, Power, and the Cover-Up That Never Ended, November 20th to the 23rd in Dallas. Any details on how people can get tickets, or can they watch online? Do we know?
Well, it's put on by the JFK Historical Group, and if you do a Google search for JFK Historical Group, it pulls up, and you can get tickets there. You can get tickets at the door, and it's been interesting. I mean, for years, there's been conferences in Dallas about the JFK, on his anniversary of his death, sadly. And we've been generally ignored completely in Dallas. Okay. And starting last year, we finally had some radio interviews in Dallas about the convention, and we got local people showing up, which was very good, because
it only took 60 years, but better late than never. What's behind that, Pete? There is an awakening. Was it COVID, maybe? That maybe provided the impetus for people to start questioning everything, finally, including JFK.
Well, it's very interesting. Sitting in the chair that I am, publisher, I get lots of people calling and different things, and there's many different things that quote unquote radicalize people. Okay. I mean, for a long time, the JFK assassination has radicalized people for a long time because of the ridiculousness of the storyline. Okay. Then 9/11 came along and radicalized people into looking behind the scenes. And yes, I think COVID got people looking behind the scenes. Okay. So,
the Epstein files.
And the Epstein files, because I mean, I had to go out there and tell people that QAnon is a psyop. It's not real. Okay, but like any psyop, there's some kernels of you have to have a kernel of truth in there. Mm-hmm. Okay, for it to be something. But we're doing a new book about Epstein called Blue Butterfly.
Yes.
Which I believe you've spoken with the author.
Yes.
Which goes into not the salaciousness and the girls, but the scientist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is something people have ignored. His connection with geneticists and so forth, and this testimony of this one of the victims, which is sort of the central figure in the Blue Butterfly, her journal. She has memories of waking up on a surgical table, and I'm not sure if that was at the ranch in New Mexico, underneath the ranch in New Mexico. Yeah, this is absolutely wild. I'll put the links for that episode in this description as well for today.
Right, but that it all relates together, okay? Because see, MK Ultra, okay, officially, okay, MK Ultra had a beginning and an end, okay? Well, I can trace the mind control programming before MK Ultra, okay? And I mean, like, why did they call it Operation Bluebird? Well, it was because of Metrolink's play, because mind control is first about trance, and then role playing and trauma, and so and where was Metrolinx play first put on? It was put on 1906 in Moscow.
Sorry, what was the play?
Pavlov.
What was the play?
Bluebird.
Okay.
Metrolinx play called the Bluebird.
Metrolinx play, got it.
Metrolinx. And so it was first put on, like I say, in Moscow, the same place that you had Pavlov doing his dogs. Okay. And then you can also, there's some tracing that has to do with the Thule Society in Germany. So just like the mob found out that, if I've got a house of ill repute and I've got the same girls just stay in that house of ill repute, after a while the traffic goes down. So I got to move the girls around. Well, just like with MK Ultra, if you keep it in one place for a while, people find out about it, and then they start to attack it or whatever. So this thing gets moved around to other places, and so there's a good chance that Epstein was involved with this type thing because every time the girls come in, they're brought to the kitchen and given a bottle of water. And what could you put in that water or something to, again, all these scientists and these experiments, and this corruption,
it's all connected. It's all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah.
And I mean, every president since the 90s have promised transparency on the JFK files, and yet we still have pages that remain heavily redacted or even withheld. We don't have everything. There are the CIA documents as well that have not been released. Who is still protecting the secret and why? What's so dangerous about the information that's over 60 years old? It's not the people, the individuals, it's the institutions and the secret societies.
Yeah. I would go along with that. Why do people hang on to power? What is it that they want? Our country of government of and by and for the people. Okay, our founding fathers knew the difference. Okay, they'd lived under a king or whatever you want to call it. And this experiment here is very bold, and there are a lot of people that do not want government of and by and for the people.
When was the last time the United States had government by and for the people?
Oh, Lord have mercy. There was quite a period between the end of the Civil War and then the start of the Spanish-American War. Okay, and because I show in my books a couple things how the Spanish-American War, Skull and Bones, used that and the drug trade to basically get their hooks very strong into our government and to change it. Okay, because. They started with first the income tax and then fake money, the Federal Reserve. Okay. And then once you got that in place, you got to get the people in debt. So you got World War I, you got World War II. Okay. World War II, we get the thing. We need to raise some money. We gotta beat these guys, and it's going to be a tax. But hey, guess what? You don't have to lick a stamp and send it to us. We're going to go straight to your employer and take it. Okay. And that raised the amount of people paying the income tax here from about 20% to 60%. Okay. Which then, they started to, one of the first things Skull and Bones did was to take over our education system to dumb us down. So we don't understand our civic duty, and we don't understand what the Constitution is. Okay, and so they've been dumbing us down for quite a while. And
let's talk motive very quickly here with JFK. We've discussed this so many times on this program, and you and I, I'm sure, have talked about it as well. But we've heard some everything from he was going to release information about UFOs to the, he was going to, it was the oil depletion tax. It was the oil barons that did it. It was the Federal Reserve was threatened by Kennedy, as Jackson and Lincoln both did, the central banks and so forth. What, to your mind, did it have anything to do with any of that, all of that, or was it mainly this ritual, this mass trauma, this ritual? What was it?
The main thing is the ritual. Okay, they're going to pull all these other things in there. I mean, one thing that you find when you have big intelligence ops, this is an op that is run with intelligence protocol, okay, is that people will do all kinds of things, murder, steal money, because they know when the cleanup crew comes on, it's going away. I mean, there was a group that made, I think it was $500 million that day out of the stock market through Tino Angelis. He was a salad oil king, and he had a bunch of these tanks that were supposed to be full of oil, and they were completely empty. And he went down on Tuesday, and they kept propping it up and so that it would take 2 hits on the stock market that day. There's lots of different reasonings, but the main motivation was the psychological hit against the American people, because you look at the trust that the American people had in their government, okay, before the Kennedy assassination and after, and it just starts going down. So the cohesion of the American population, and because once you break that cohesion and you start breaking them apart, okay, and then giving this person stuff to throw at those people over there and all of that, it creates the division, which then allows them to divide and conquer the American system.
So are you saying even if Richard Nixon had won that election in 1960, if he were in that presidential motorcade, he would have been assassinated?
No. It was set up for JFK. It was set up for a Kennedy to be the person that got shot. Okay, because there was this animus that was created between the Fitzgeralds and the British Empire.
Got it.
So it's.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, Nixon was assassinated later, 10 years later anyway, political assassination. They changed their method of their MO a little bit, right? They took him out. They took him out with Watergate.
Right. Well, Nixon. I mean, Nixon got his jobs by blackmailing the Dulles brothers. Okay, he was a lawyer at the end of World War II, running around New York City, wrapping up some contracts. The Dulles brothers were out in a mansion on Long Island. Okay, somewhere Nixon came across the fact that the Dulles brothers weren't bringing in 1 or 2 Nazis, but they were bringing in thousands of Nazis against direct written orders from Harry Truman. Okay, so he blackmailed him, and pretty soon Prescott Bush had his arm around Nixon in California, and Prescott was introducing him to the mob people in California so Nixon then became part of the narrative that they have to sell to the American public, okay, a controlled narrative. Okay, so Nixon became one of those people in the narratives. Okay.
All right. You have a new title coming out at TrineDay, I believe, on JFK. Is it Killed by Consensus?
Yes, JFK Killed by Consensus by David Mantik. He's a scientist, a doctor. He's the main person right now about, he was allowed to go in and look at the X-rays, and, they now know that, there was, one that came up front, that there are people, they're talking about at least 3 headshots. Okay. And then he went and looked at all the different, people that they talk about being in it, and he, shows how, you know, because there was people for a long time said LBJ had no foreknowledge, and he shows over and over again how LBJ had foreknowledge about this. And again, it goes back to those 5 people that I said that Trent Parker had caught on the phone with Hoover.
Right. Dr. David Mandick and Walter Herbst will be on the podcast very soon as well. So that's JFK killed by consensus from TrineDay. Obviously, it suggests a coalition, not a lone gunman, not even one rogue agency. In your view, well, you've named a lot of the names. Anyone else who was part of that consensus? And again, what shared interest united them in removing Kennedy?
Like I say, these guys had a conspiracy, and then they brought other people into the action. Okay, they didn't bring them into their conspiracy. Okay, and the Kennedy assassination was a lot like the Julius Caesar assassination, where you had a lot of people get their knife bloody. Okay, because then they couldn't talk against you and blah, 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 because they're all, kind of responsible. So it's a way to protect yourself. Okay. So yeah, there was they engendered a consensus that, whether it be around the Federal Reserve, whether it be about his military strategy, whatever. Okay. They would, like I say, get people into position. I mean, there's like a lot of people that talk about James Jesus Angleton being involved. And I look at that and I say, no, why would you bring James Jesus Angleton in? You would just go ahead and do the act, okay? And then he's got a file that says Oswald on it that he's had for quite a while. So he's going to freak out and he's going to run around and create mud, okay? It's like the Cubans, okay? Both the Cubans in Watergate and in the Kennedy assassination, they get lied to, okay, and told to go stand over there, okay? And I mean, they even thought that they were carrying water for the action, but they were just carrying water for the mud that surrounds it.
Right.
Okay.
In other words, some of the same people involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba were also involved supposedly in the Watergate break-in. Just wanted to tie that up for some listeners. You mentioned Cuba. Walter Herbst, who we just mentioned, his book ties the assassination to protecting West Berlin and avoiding a second Cuban invasion, like a geopolitical move. What does that suggest? JFK's death was also, well, it does. It suggests it was a policy execution rather than just a personal one.
Right. And again, I don't agree with his conclusions, but the exposition that he gives is quite good and talks about a lot of different players and whatnot. And so, because just because, like I say, if you only read books that just you agreed with 100%, how many books could you read? Know,
exactly.
And so, it's a, the JFK assassination, and the research into it and the looking into it. You got people over here that had a view from here. You got people over here, and just because I found out that just because somebody has a different viewpoint doesn't mean that he's wrong. Okay, and so to my mind, you have to look at everything that's out there if you can, as much as you can.
Right. I mean, you've published authors who argue that the same power structure that eliminated Kennedy still operate today, just under new branding. Intelligence, defense, media, tech. I mean, if the deep state was born, let's say in Dallas, where do you see its fingerprints now?
Well, I'm 76, okay, so I've seen a few things. And, when I was growing up, and for many years, the big thing was, the UN is bad, and they're coming to take away your guns, and we're all going to be commies and stuff like that, right? And now we've got, Trump and Musk and this TechNate thing, which is a hell of a lot more authoritarian than what they were trying to say that we were going to get from the UN, So, if they can't get you one way, they'll get you another way. And so I still see, the fingerprints of the secret society system trying to exert control, one thing that we did in this thing about the Fitzgeralds is there's this book by Alice Bailey, Externalization of the Hierarchy, okay, written by Lucius Trust. And they talk about how, we got to get this all in place by, it looks like 2025 is when they got to get this in place. Because, with the internet and with all of the information that's coming out, okay, it's harder and harder for their lies to stick. Okay, so obviously, if they're going to have to keep lying a whole lot more and get people to buy into their lies to continue to impose their control. I mean, I had a conversation the other day with a gentleman about, I talk about the secret societies, and I really see the secret societies as, using their imposition, because you have the secret societies, and you have the next level is sovereign countries. And then in between this, you got intelligence agencies, criminal gangs, fraternal organizations, and they're able from the secret societal level to go down and affect into those sovereign countries. Okay, so but then these other people are saying, well, no, it's all just class warfare. That's the dynamic. That's what's going on. It's just class warfare. It's just the peasants with their pitchforks trying to, rise up against their feudal lord. And I say, I see it more as a secret societal imposition. And, they can say, well, the feudal lords are just using the secret societies as a tool to do that. But I don't know. So, what is the dynamic? What dynamic are we living in? And how can we get to government of and by and for the people?
Great question. Do you have an answer? How do we get there?
Well, my answer has been through education and through books to try and get people to understand where we're at. Because if we don't understand where we're at, how in the heck are we going to get somewhere? And we're under, heavy psychological warfare, that's been directed at us through institutions. And, you don't have to control, the secret society, they don't have to control everybody. They just got to control some people at certain nodes and then control a certain amount. And so I'm very hopeful for the future, because I really think that, the personal computer and the internet have really given a lot of quote unquote power to the people, okay, to help us understand the situation that we're in.
Well, some influencers out there that are much bigger than any mainstream media outlet now. People like Candace Owens. People can agree with her, disagree with her. Tucker Carlson, agree, disagree, but their digital platforms, they absolutely dwarf the CNNs and the MSNBCs and Fox News and the New York Post and the Washington Times.
Right.
They're irrelevant now. Right.
So, we're living in a new world. Is it a new world order? I mean, Lord have mercy, and we have, we're getting to see the ability, okay, for us to, kind of, run our own affairs to a certain extent in a government situation without the implied control. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities out there for us to do. Okay, I mean, I don't know. Do we all have to agree on what it is we're going to do, or and another thing is right now in the United States of America, we've got 435 representatives, and that is because of the size of the damn building. Okay, because when you look at there was initially 12 things in the Bill of Rights, and 2 of them didn't get adopted. One of those things was there should be a representative for every 30,000 people. Okay, so if we had a representative for every 30,000 people, there'd be like 1,500 people there in Washington, D.C. taking care of our business. Okay, and so 15,000 people, it's a lot harder to blackmail a bunch of those people to get them under your control, because, that's been one of the big control mechanisms, has been blackmail. Yeah. Okay, and hopefully we can push on through that and create, government of and by and for the people.
Kris, always a pleasure. Thank you again. This big conference, JFK Conference, coming up on November 20th to the 23rd. I'll find the links to the JFK Historical Group and put a link there where people can buy tickets, make the trip to Dallas. I don't know for sure, but there may be a sort of an online streaming option as well for those who can't make the trip down.
I'm sure there is.
But it's called History Declassified, JFK Power and the Cover-Up That Never Ended. And Kris, you'll be there. One of the Fitzgeralds of the Fitzgerald-Kennedy clan will be there with some pretty explosive testimony. This one promises to be different than any other of the annual JFK events. And, of course, so many books, 44 books on the JFK assassination from so many different perspectives, available at TrineDay Books, TrineDay.com, TrineDay.com, TrineDay, all one word, TrineDay.com. Kris, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add?
Thank you. Well, I made a mistake earlier, excuse me, and you were correct. Okay. Honey Fitz was Rose's father. So he was JFK's grandfather. Yeah.
Right. So Kennedy's middle name was his mother's maternal, maiden name. Right. Fitzgerald. Right. Got it. Okay. Great.
Okay.
All the best, Kris. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. God bless.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.